I'm Ansley Cole, and I met GRBrandy back in 1982. I picked him up when he was hitchhiking in Northern California. Hubert's family made cognac for a really long time, but they got bought by this huge conglomerate, Martell, and modern cognac's pretty industrial. Hubert wanted to get back to these very traditional ways of making brandy. I like old stuff a lot, and here was a chance to keep something special alive. Hubert went back to France and brought over a really old-fashioned piece of equipment, and we built a shed for it up on my ranch. We wanted an old still because we could run it by hand. Modern stills are automatic. People set the still, push the button, let it run. Distilling by hand means every time we're doing something on the still, we taste what's coming through the still before we do what we're going to do. We were consciously transferring methods that have been in common use in France, let's say 150 years ago, but today they're gone. These methods aren't just about distillation. They're about a whole bunch of things, in the vineyard, say, or in the aging cellar, but they're all about things that are being done by hand. And we brought these methods here to California. In our literature, we call them craft methods. The most fundamental thing is the grapes. The reason they make cognac where they do is that the local grapes make pretty lousy table wine, so they make distilled spirits out of them. So we started looking for neutral grapes. So we're looking at Thompson Seedless down in Fresno. But back then, good wine grapes were available for not much money in Mendocino County. So for logistical reasons, we started poking around looking for good grapes, local grapes that we could afford. And Stan Hildreth heard about this and offered us some really beautiful old vine Colombard. And then Charlie Barra offered us some Pinot Noir, and we tried them. And the first time that Pinot Noir came to the still, Hubert said to me, "This is the best stuff I've ever seen." So we learned to distill grapes that would make really excellent wine. Some of our Pinot Noir make bottles of wine that are worth 50 or 70 bucks, but it wasn't easy because nobody ever distilled these grapes. We took years to get it right. There was nobody we could go to. Let me put it this way. It took years to get it all right, but we learned to pay a lot of attention to varietal wine grapes. Now, these grapes here are old vine Semillon. They're being harvested on the Crawford Ranch in McDowell Valley. It's a 5-acre block left over from back when people planted whatever they felt like. These are some of our favorite grapes, and the guys are picking them early in the morning so that the grapes get to the winery while they're still fresh. Semillon makes rich, deep brandy. It gives you a lot of volume in your mouth, but it ages slowly. It takes about 7 years in the barrel before it shows you what's there. Now, it's not just the grapes, and it's not just how you make them into wine. It's also the distillation. Like I said before us, nobody ever distilled these grapes. Nobody distilled Pinot Noir. Nobody distilled really good Sauvignon Blanc. Nobody distilled Gamay Beaujolais. Nobody distilled Chenin Blanc. And each of these varietals, any varietal grape needs to be distilled in its own way. It's like wine. The vineyards where they're grown make a big difference, and that changes how you run your still. And every single harvest is different too. That's why these craft methods are so important. The brandy we get from these grapes depends on how we run the still. For example, if you change the temperature, things come through slower or a little bit faster, so you can accentuate something that the wine is giving you. Or if there's something you don't like quite as much, you can have not quite as much of it come across. And what we're watching for the last couple of minutes is Joe Corley, who's finishing up a first distillation run. He's been making an intermediate product that comes off the still at about 27% alcohol that's going to be distilled again when we make brandy. What's coming off the still right now is down to about 4% alcohol, and it's starting to smell and taste like what happens to asparagus or green beans when you leave them on the stove too long, like overcooked vegetables. And a little that's nice. It's like this complexity, but if you have too much, then the batch that he's running and the whole barrel is going to have too much. So pretty soon what he's going to do is cut the run, meaning he's going to divert what's left in the still into a separate tank. And what he's done is he's slowed the still way down to give him time to think about exactly when to do it. And it takes him 10 or 15 minutes to make that decision. That's why he slows the still down so much. Every run he makes, 3 wine distillations, the second distillation we're making brandy, and the 80 barrels we make every year, we make these cuts every time we run the still. Now we're in the aging cellar. I can go on and on about this. It's 80% of the work. And these barrels cost about $1,000 each. They're made of French Limousin oak, and we buy them from Picard, who he's a guy that the French government once named Craftsman of the Year for France. He's one of the last guys who air dries his oak. You could save 2 years by putting the wood in the steam kiln, but then the oak tastes like it's been cooked. Our brandies tend to be delicate and fruity because we're using such good grapes. So we want to put them into really good oak. The lignans are a little bit sweet, and Limousin's got an open grain, so the aging isn't tight. It's soft. It's just about right. And each one of these barrels you're looking at has a different brandy inside. Even brandy we make from the same wine on 2 successive distillations is always slightly different. I can't tell you why, but it always is. There's this huge job in the cellar that nobody sees. It's totally invisible, which is just knowing what's inside all of those 1,200 barrels that are sitting out there. If you don't taste what's there on a regular basis, you can't know what it's going to be ready for. You don't know. If you don't taste what's there on a regular basis, you can't know when it's going to be ready for the use to which you want to put it. It means you can't put blends together. So there's a huge amount of time spent sampling, tasting, trying to imagine what's going to happen to these brandies while they continue to sit in the barrel. Meanwhile, they're getting richer and mellower and more profound. So this is just to show you a couple or 3 things that we do when we make brandy by hand. There's dozens of these things. The kind of attention you have to pay when you're trying to do every single thing the best way you know how is like endless. Every year you learn more. You know, Rob Report magazine has a panel of experts, and when we released our XO for the first time in 1996, they said it was the best liquor in the world. Right below it was a $1,500 limited bottling of cognac from Hennessy. Now, we don't say this kind of thing to boast. We say it because it shows what this kind of attention can accomplish when you use these beautiful craft methods of making spirits.